All right, welcome back to Firewall. I'm your host, Bradley Tusk. My guest today is Liz Glazer, and Liz, for purposes of this podcast, is the founder of Vital City, which is this really phenomenal new magazine and website about New York City politics and government and policy. And I know that if you listen to this podcast all the time, you've heard me mention it before. But the reason I wanted Liz to come on is I feel like if you like Firewall, you would like Vital City. So I wanted to really expose her and her thinking to you guys. Now, interestingly, Liz is not from the media world. She was a high-level federal prosecutor, worked at top jobs in city and state government, especially around criminal justice. And then you pivot into an industry that is reported to be dying and do so with your own personal money. Why?
Yeah, timing, right? So I didn't really think about it as a journalism enterprise. I thought of it as a way to serve up great ideas directly to policymakers, get it into the drinking water, and to serve up real data and information to everyday New Yorkers, really to kind of stop the room from spinning. You know, you think about they're eating the cats and the dogs, Duffy coming to New York and saying the subways are a hellscape. Where do people turn if they don't even know whether 400 murders a year is a lot or a little?
Right.
Right. And for policymakers who sit in the seats trying to actually make the city work, they're always looking for great ideas. But running the city is a pretty demanding job.
Yeah.
So how can you serve it up so it's just hot wired directly in, and you have some respect for the problems of governance and implementation?
Right. So in other words, Elon is not reading Vital City.
Hope not.
So you're 15 plus issues in,
Yeah.
and you have a different perspective than you had before because it is more dispassionate, more objective, surrounded by lots of smart, thoughtful people. If I gave you a magic wand and said there are three things that you could just decree as so now in New York City or state government based on everything you've learned since starting this, what would they be?
That is a great question. I think one thing that I would say is that the physical city actually matters a lot, and yet there is no attention to the capital, but that the way in which the capital budget is scrutinized is very, very different from the expense budget.
Yeah.
So you think about a neighborhood and how much safety and life is defined by the physical neighborhood, and you think about how many capital projects at any one time are going on. You know, the median strip is being done, the library's being rehabbed, et cetera. Yeah. But none of those things are ever done in a coordinated way order to think about how to make this place, vibrant and, by the way, safe.
Right. And so what is there, would you create some sort of new role that kind of thinks about all of the different intersections of capital, or is that something city planning could do, but they're just not doing enough of it?
Yeah. I mean, I think that actually that notion of the person who's in charge of the public realm is actually quite an interesting notion. It's just that there's no power associated with it, or anything else. But I think that an attention to the physical city, and as it connects to its economic, vitality, is actually quite important. The second thing that I've advocated for a long time, and actually was put into practice, but in such a kind of deranged and terrible way that I feel the true idea didn't come through, which is I think that there should be a real deputy mayor for public safety. That is, you have all these sort of traditional forces that are considered public safety, the DAs and defenders and courts and police department and jails, et cetera, none of whom answer to the same boss.
Right.
But then public safety actually consists of way more than the apparatus of the criminal justice system. So you have, for example, random controlled trials in New York City showing that street lighting reduces nighttime felony crime 36%. Not in 10 years, but when you turn on the lights. And there are a number of other kinds of things that show how civic services are twofers. They make life better, and because they make life better, crime also goes down. And that somebody who is truly a deputy mayor of public safety, interested in the full gamut, could work with the deputy mayors for health and human services, et cetera, to have a more three-dimensional plan than we do now.
I mean, Adams had one, right? But it was just sort of managing the NYPD, or whatever.
Right, and who did he put in? He put in somebody who the mayor himself didn't even announce him. The deputy mayor for public safety announced himself in an op-ed in the Daily News that could have just been titled, "I am not a crook."
Yeah.
It was just stunning.
Right.
Well, on the subject of safety, I want to ask you a question about that. So you're someone who's worked in criminal justice, prosecutor. You're also a New Yorker. You ride the subway. You are out and about, as we all are. What do you experience, like on the subway, for example, when there's like somebody doing something that feels a little dangerous or volatile or whatever? How do you respond to that? Do you just does everyone become the kind of primitive New Yorker where you just want to have someone beaten up right in front of you just to like that feeling of like having a problem taken care of right away? How do you sort of meet those two things, the part of your brain that's a professional and the part of your brain that's just a normal New Yorker trying to get through their day?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the old joke is, real New Yorkers never take the top newspaper on the pile. They only take the second one. They never look anyone in the eye, et cetera. They don't go into empty subway cars. And so there is a little bit of that. But, the subways are actually incredibly safe. And people need them. They're the lifeblood of the city. And people, need them to go to work and to school. So I think...
I mean, I agree with that, and I think the statistics show.
So how do you, based on what you guys have learned from the first, 15 episodes,
Yeah.
So there is this, I don't know if it's a cognitive, Eric Adams would call it a cognitive dissonance, but I think it's just sort of at least a gap in perception between the stats that show how safe or unsafe the city is and how people perceive it to be. But I know for a fact, based on tons and tons of polling, that people perceive it to feel really bad.
Absolutely.
And if they live here, effectively, that becomes reality in many ways. So what do you think accounts for the gap, and what have you seen that would be a good way to solve it?
Yeah. So there absolutely is that gap, and I actually think there's something that's real underlying it. When we look at crime stats, typically the way crime is measured is by 7 major crimes: murder, robbery, rape. That's kind of what the FBI does, and that. And when you look at that, we're doing pretty well. We're not as good as we were pre-pandemic, but things are coming down, et cetera. But when you look at all crimes, which are many, things like, misdemeanor assault, of which, there are 400 murders, but there are tens of thousands of assaults. And assaults are the guy body slams you on the subway, you get pushed, you get harassed. Those, as far as volume goes, dwarf the number of 7 majors. And when you look at what the trajectory there is, it's just been spiking incredibly. And there's a second thing that's going on, which is the composition of crimes is changing. So it used to be the big violent crime on the subways and above ground, as far as volume went, is robberies. So I'm sticking you up for your money, your phone, your whatever. That has plummeted. But things like assault, the thing which is the impulsive spur of the moment, push and the shove, that's going up.
What do you attribute that to?
I do think that there's a mental health issue going on, and I think that's what people are seeing on the street, and that translates into being afraid.
So I'll throw a few different potential causes for it, because yes, but when we talk about how it used to be stick-ups, that means that you didn't have the same, or Hugo and I, when we were recording this morning, one of the things we were debating were like 3 things that were better in the 90s than today in New York City. And one of my answers was the streets and subways felt safer because you didn't have as many erratic, mentally ill people who just didn't know what they were going to do, which creates fear, right? So it could be one of our theses was, like in the 90s, the street drug of choice was like heroin, and an opioid seems to sort of calm people, whereas fentanyl now maybe has a different impact. Another one might be the internet and social media didn't exist, in the 90s. It does today. Maybe it's that we had more social services available then than we have today. But like something has caused it, right? What do you think it is?
I don't know, because I don't think it's just pandemic related.
Yeah.
Meaning we're seeing this trend predating the pandemic.
Right.
But certainly the pandemic aggravated something. So you're seeing it in all kinds of spheres. There's more aggressive driving. Everything from really serious stuff like kids and mental health to just stupid things like people talking out loud in the movies or and so
Collapse of social norms.
Yeah, that the sense of sort of, well, what do you do in public and what do you not do in public?
Yeah.
That's frayed.
And do you think, so is that parents not teaching their kids? Is it the education system having changed? Is it kind of DEI norms saying you can't call things out that you used to call out, and that creates the problem? Because you're right, behavior is absolutely different. And, there is sort of this overall societal loneliness epidemic, and so maybe people aren't learning how to interact with each other in the same way. But one, is it the role of city government to try to deal with that? And 2, if so, what would you do?
So I do think it's the role of the city government to deal with some of it. So I do think the role of government is to do things that don't necessarily make money and don't necessarily have a cost benefit in that way, but either have to do with the suffering of New Yorkers or the fears of New Yorkers, and this is sort of both-sided.
Yeah.
So that when you have people who are, unhoused, suffering from mental illness on the streets, that is a city problem. And the city for sure has thrown literally billions of dollars at that problem.
Yeah.
But one, it's an incredibly difficult problem. And 2, it's kind of atomized how all these, where the resources are deployed, what actually can be done, where are people housed, how do you persuade them to go even into supportive housing?
Liz, how do people get Vital City? How do they read it? How do they learn more?
So you can get it online at vitalcitynyc.org. If you would like hard copies, we do from time to time do issues that are gobsmackingly beautiful.
They really are. I would say
Who's your designer?
A fantastic group called Design for Progress.
Okay.
Paragini Amin is the one who leads that.
Nice.
they do a beautiful job.
Incredible job.
I've not seen the physical magazine yet, so
it's really
I'll
great.
have to take a
some
look.
upstairs, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Great. All right. Well, look, as someone who does both subscribe to the magazine, write for it sometimes, and reads the website, I would highly recommend, if you like this podcast, you'd probably like that too. So checking it out. And Liz, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Nice job.
Appreciate it.
Firewall is recorded at my bookstore, P&T Knitwear, located at 180 Orchard Street on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. We'd love to hear from you with questions, feedbacks, or idea for a guest. Just email me at bradley@firewall.media or find me on LinkedIn. And to keep up with what's on my mind and my latest writing, please follow my new Substack at bradleytusk.substack.com. Thanks again for listening.